Welcome to this first tutorial on Anymaker's microcontrollers. So first things first, we're going to need a battery, microcontroller, electric port, the electric tool, and the battery. So in order to get a microcontroller to work, you need to place a battery down, microcontroller. Like a lot of components, you can squeeze and stretch this as you want. We'll make this 2x2 for now. You need a data port, or sorry, a electric port on each one, electricity, and a battery. And as you can see now, the microcontroller is powered. And if we grab the microcontroller tool, we can now write code for it. All right, so let's go over the command palette. It's this first, or reading left to right, it's the last one, highlighted blue here. I'm going to break down each one of these into categories. So you have your logic statements, the if else, repeat, and then for each item. Next, you have the value types. So this will create a new integer, and by that I mean you can type in the number 1, 2, same with fractions, strings, and then true and false. The green ones here are your mathematical and logical operations. So you have your addition, subtraction, you have your comparisons, list contains, you have logical not, you have some more advanced functions, trig functions, um, things like that. These orange ones here are used to create and manipulate variables. So you create a variable, set a variable. The blue and yellow ones create outputs and inputs for the microcontroller. We'll go in depth more on those later. And then these light bluish green ones, these are for creating custom types, and these are your built-in types. And then you have your kind of pinkish ones here for creating functions. And then you have your special for like a blank line and entering comments. So next we're going to go over creating variables. You can use the create function here, and you can give it a type. So let's say sure. We're going to name this counter. Right. We can set counter to a new integer of 0. Right. And one thing to note, the palette kind of gives you hints of what goes there. So you see how the create green named and then a gray gives you your name here, and then set orange, which is your variables, to white for your um, actual values. You can kind of use that as a rule of thumb on what goes where. So now that we've created a counter variable, let's get it to count. So we can set counter to this case, arithmetic counter 1. So now every loop, this will get set to counter plus 1. So, and to demonstrate this, there is a debug function. So you can hit this, resume, and you can see counter is increasing. You need to resume this for it to continue working again. For our next steps, we're showing the if else statements here. So you can if greater than counter is greater than, let's say, let's create a new one. create an integer called, we make it a fractional named period. And then we can set fractional to, let's say, 60. So if counter is greater than period, and now, so here's an error. Kind of interesting to note, the game will give you errors and give you a readout of what's actually happening. So it's saying the input type is incompatible with another input type. And then it expected a Boolean value. So first, the last error here is just saying this doesn't work. Got an error. What they mean by they're not compatible is period is a fractional and it needs to be an integer. We can fix that. We can set period. We can typecast period to an integer, and it works. Now, if counter is greater than period, we want to set counter back to 0. And so if we go look in our debugger, you can see now that put a breakpoint here, and it stops. There, 61, resume. So there is the basic usage of creating scripts. The more advanced features include creating functions. So if you use this define one here, and say define counter, we'll call it. We can create parameters for it, similar to our variables. We need to put a type here. So say integer named CL counter. And then we're going to create another parameter called going to be a fractional named period. What we're going to do is we can move these variables here, or these lines up here, like so. And then we can set, using these reddish pink ones now, EL counter to counter. EL counter is less than period 0. And I want to show you an interesting bit of way this currently works as of 0.0.19. Bear in mind this may change. So when we execute logic, we're going to pass counter and period into. And going to the debugger, I want to show you something. See how they're continuing to increase. So if we go to 0, 1, 2, they're keeping up. And so whatever you pass into here will be updated into here. So this is the way you can return things. But it's also a gotcha if, say, you want to do arithmetic on this. You may need to create a new variable inside the function in order to not mess with your inputs. All right, one last thing I want to go over in this first bit of tutorial is this green define. So there's a bug here in 0.0.19 where it erases the original types. You got to create it a few times. And there we go. So now we have a custom type. We're going to call it counter type, right? We're going to create a member, and we're going to call this member. We got to give it a type again, so integer counter. Create a new member, fractional called period. And so now, instead of doing this, we can create a counter type, right? And then we can pass counter counter and counter period into our function. And then now we need to set our numbers originally to what they're supposed to be. So set counter counter to new integer and new fractional, say 30. And now if you look here again, sorry about that. I had a bit of an issue there. I think I figured it out. So you notice that sometimes the script doesn't quite update like it's supposed to. I can set this 60. Worked that time. Previously it didn't work. Sometimes it can be a little finicky to get things to update like they're supposed to. Just keep that in mind. Last thing I really wanted to show you for this tutorial. I want to thank you all thank you for bearing with me through this tutorial. Pray you have a good evening, night, day, wherever you're at, and God bless, and hope to see you next time.